Well, thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you for the Core 77 team for inviting me. So I'm going to be speaking about the romance of commerce. Now, this afternoon, you've probably heard lots of sensible ways to get your business going, how to make huge inroads in the world of commerce. Now, I can pretty much guarantee that everything I'm going to tell you is not sensible at all, and is really probably totally the wrong way to go about setting up and running a business. But it does prove that there is another way. There's always your own way of doing things. So, coming up, I think there are 5 or 6. Let me give you a quick rundown of what's going to happen over the next half an hour. So I'm going to introduce Bompas Parr, tell you what the studio is about. Then there's going to be a call for volunteers. Then I'll be going into the modus operandi, how we do projects at Bompas Parr. I'm going to be talking about risk, not necessarily risk and reward, just risk and doing really, really stupid, dangerous things. I'm going to be talking about how we've kept the show on the road for the last 10 years. And finally, we're going to go out with what will hopefully be an almighty huge bang. So, Bompas Parr. Now, this is called a show reel, and I didn't even realize that we had a show reel at Bompas Parr. And you'll realize that because there's actually spelling mistakes in it. Maybe you've never showed it to anyone. But this is apparently the kind of work that we do. So that's the glossy version. But frankly, Bompas Parr is always about doing projects that we love and just dealing generally with things like booze. So this is alcoholic architecture, a walking cloud of gin and tonic where you can get drunk, inebriated through your lungs and eyeballs. Sex, this is the breast bouncy castle at the Museum of Sex in Manhattan, which has been there for years now. Why not? Lava, why cook on a barbecue when you can cook over, not even flames, just things that are thousands of degrees centigrade. Toxic waste. Sound like a 8-year-old boy talking. It's not actually toxic waste. This is the reopening of the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in London, where we did a big spectacular. If you don't do fireworks, you can just chuck a load of fluorescein into a river and make it glow in the dark. Beautiful. And of course, where it all started was jelly. So the company started as a niche architectural jelly mongers, and more of that coming up in a moment. Now, before we move on, I did mention volunteers. So I'm looking for a couple of people, and there are a couple of roles. They're a bit different, different personalities, so don't be shy. Now, the volunteers will be needed later on, but I want to choose the volunteers now, so you have time to think about what might happen to you. So if you're game, please put your hand up. Great, so we've got lots of keen people. Now, can I invite everyone who's got their hand up to stand up? So, let's take this. Just going to come down and see. Need to just inspect your footwear. Right. Put your feet up here. It's you.
Oh, great.
What's your name?
Joe.
Joe. Thank you, Joe. Okay, just stay where you are, Joe. Okay. So Joe gets the safety goggles. And you've got glasses on as well, so you'll be extra protected. And also these gloves.
Fantastic.
So you can put them on now, or you can wait. And then, hi, what's your name?
Katrina.
Katrina. This is a bottle of gin. You need to just open it. You can have a little sip if you like, but mainly you just need to open it and hold on. Don't lose it. Okay. So thank you, Joe and Katrina. So where were we? Okay. So Bompas Parr, we've done thousands, literally, of projects over the last 10 years. And it all started for us with jelly, wobbly starts. But for us, jelly was a calling card. And it was something that when I started working with Sam Bompas, a friend from school, we decided that we would get a stall at London's Borough Market making jelly. Now, people weren't even that interested in food 10 years ago. Chocolate brownies were like the big thing. So we decided we'd do jelly. Borough Market said jelly's ridiculous, no one eats jelly. They told us to get lost, we didn't get a stall. Did, however, decide that no, people are really interested in jelly, all this nostalgia going on. We wanted to make beautiful we want to make these beautiful Victorian-style jellies, not quite like this, but moulded jellies, or jello, as you call it. And I couldn't afford to buy the beautiful Victorian moulds, so I set about trying to make my own. And at the time, I was studying to be an architect, so I knew about 3D printing and modeling. 3D printing had just come in. The university had got its first basic Z Corp sort of powder, plaster 3D printer. So we started making our own jelly molds. And this was the first mold I made it just a really complicated one, basically, of St. Paul's Cathedral. And this set off a chain of events that was quite unexpected. So we decided that we would ask architects from all around the world and designers to design architectural jellies of their famous buildings, and that they would be entered into a competition for charity to find the ultimate jelly architect. And we did this, and we had a lot of really, really good entries. People like Lord Foster and Lord Rogers and Will Alsop and Sir Nicholas Grimshaw. Like all the British greats were entering. And before we knew it, we'd sold 2,000 tickets to a jelly banquet. Now, we didn't know what a jelly banquet was, and the people going to it certainly didn't, but they had bought a ticket. So suddenly we had to put on an event. And this is a picture of the event. We didn't really know that you meant to take photographs of the work that you did back then. So this is one that I found. I made this big table, 12 meters long. It had hundreds of jellies on. They were all wobbling. I fixed a windscreen wiper motor from a truck beneath it. So it went like this, big weight on it. The jellies would wobble. They had lights in them. It was all nice. There was scent of strawberry in the air. There were ballet dancers performing with giant spoons. There was a sound of jelly wobbling. Lots of things going on. We got a booze sponsor. That was a good one. And in a weird twist of fate, we also got Heston Blumenthal, he was in his heyday then. He's right there in the middle, looking rather shocked. He was filming his TV show about Victorian food, and the production company decided they needed to speak. He needed to speak to an expert about Victorian food. So he came down and spoke to myself. I'd read one book. Maybe Heston had only read the first chapter. I'm not sure, but I was the expert. So he was filming his show there. We got him in as one of the judges. There was jelly wrestling, because that's what you do when there's jelly. But anyway, we started in London getting a name for ourselves, doing jelly. And jelly was the thing, and one thing really led to another. So the outsider, well, off the back of all this jelly stuff going on, people started calling up and saying, oh, we want you to, say, build us a jelly in the shape of a castle as large as a castle. Can you do it? So no, of course not. We couldn't do it. Like, jellies are this big, and we weren't that good at making them. We just happened to be the only people making them. So Sam decided that instead of making this jelly in the shape of a castle, we would make them a 12-course Victorian breakfast, because we were the jelly and the Victorian food people. So we could do that as well. But I didn't know how to do 12-course Victorian breakfast, but we just found a menu of it somewhere. I think it was something that Sam's mum found, actually, and said, oh, you might be interested in this. You're the Victorian food people. So we did a photo shoot. That was in the corner of my parents' drawing room, all their silver. Probably hadn't seen that out for a while. Workout looked quite nice. Everyone was impressed. And then we had to cook the thing. And I'm not too bad at cooking. I've never been in a commercial kitchen before. I certainly never cooked a meal with a waxwork of Queen Victoria in the corner either. But we somehow muddled through. We got our friends to dress up in Victorian garb and pretend to be proper waiters. We didn't realize that you could just hire some people who actually knew how to serve food. In fact, we really didn't know, because I spent weeks drawing out how every single course would be served, step by step. And that went even further into the kitchen. So this is how you prepare a meal, using these very complicated diagrams. And if anyone's up the front who can read what it says, basically, there's my name by it. I'm cooking everything, apart from Caleb, who's Sam's brother, and all he had to do was slice a grapefruit in half and pour some booze over it. Now, I didn't know how to delegate then either, quite clearly. But anyway, what I was doing was using techniques that I knew about, in this case architecture and planning, to do something that I really didn't know about, cooking a 12-course Victorian breakfast. Now, another way that we've always worked at Bompas Parr is using the press release. So that was mentioned a bit earlier, but we would write the press release, or rather Sam would write the press release, and then, so we'd promise to do something, and then we would sell tickets. So we had an audience who had paid to come and see that thing we promised to do, and then we would work out how to do it. Not in any other order. So the first one we did like this was called Alcoholic Architecture. This is the first incarnation of alcoholic architecture. And the press release said, the cocktail mist is using gin, tonic, water, and the same technology as Anthony Gormley's Blind Light at the Hayward Gallery. It was quite a big promise. Now, I'd never made a cloud of gin and tonic before. I hadn't even been to Anthony Gormley's exhibition at the Hayward Gallery. I'd just seen some pictures of it. But if you call enough people up, we found out the people who made the humidifiers and so on for the Anthony Gormley exhibition, and they thought it sounded quite fun, and we didn't have any money, so they just said, oh, we'll just send you a machine. Now, I only got the machine working and saw this cloud in full effect 3 minutes before the first people came in. But that was okay. It was before they came in. And the next project we did, really following on from alcoholic architecture, was called the Architectural Punch Bowl. And the press release said, today, a public competition launches to determine the cocktail that will fill the Architectural Punch Bowl. A punch bowl so big that you can row a boat across it. Now, there was a lot of booze involved, a lot of structural engineering, and all sorts of things that I hadn't really thought about. So, including the liner of this punch bowl. So I'd been doing some tests on sheets of plastic. I found a bit of plastic that was large enough to contain the liquid. The problem was, 2 days before we were due to install it, I had been doing something sensible. I put some of the booze that was going to go in this liner in the punch bowl. I had a bit of the plastic in a glass of the booze. Now, 2 days before we were due to install it, that booze in the cup tasted of diesel. So it leached out all of the nasty things in the plastic. So unfortunately, that was the only bit of plastic I could find that was big enough to line this punch bowl. So in the end, I was promised by a supplier that he could send this new type of plastic and it would be absolutely fine. He was sure it was food safe. But the only problem was it was half the size of the punch bowl. So I then decided that I simply wouldn't tell the client about this. I would carefully join the 2 bits of plastic together using some double-sided tape, rolling it over, and then clipping it with a little kind of binder you'd hold paper together with. Anyway, it worked fine. And there's someone, almost rowing on a room full of booze that you could drink from. But it wouldn't be, all of this, these early projects wouldn't be possible, all the projects are still not possible without collaboration. So one of the things that we love doing at Bompas Parr is working with different scientists, historians, experts, designers, you name it. We love working with people who are good at what they do. And when you work with the right people and you paint a vision, it doesn't matter if you don't have a huge budget. Sometimes magical things are possible. So this was one such project. This was the Truvia Voyage of Discovery, where we flooded the roof with Selfridges to create this bright green boating lake. You get in a boat, you boat through a waterfall, you'd arrive at this beautiful garden planted with stevia plants. You'd have a cocktail from the island made with the plant and boat back to a bar. And because everyone was so excited about doing a project on the roof of Selfridges, nothing interesting had ever happened up there. Selfridges decided that they'd give us the venue for free. They let us take down the ceilings in their furniture department on the floor below to inspect the steelwork to see whether the structure was strong enough and we weren't going to collapse the whole building. We managed to collaborate with the amazing designer, Faye Toogood, who did all the beautiful set dressing. We worked with great mixologists, costume designers, absolutely everyone to make a really magical project. And only possible because everyone believed in doing something that was truly different and on the face of it, not really possible. So this section is about risk. So everything we do is quite risky, but there's different sorts of risk. And sometimes, yes, after risk can come rewards, but after risk can just come all sorts of problems and pain and so on. So I'm going to look at a bit more of that with you, particularly about innovation. So this was a project we did 5 years ago for the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin. So it's the most popular and visited place in Ireland. It has about 1.4 million visitors a year. And they wanted a new experience where people could taste and experience Guinness, the liquid, many of them for the first time, a tasting experience. So we ended up designing a whole sequence of spaces that were quite architectural and intriguing and interactive, but the kind of nemesis within there was in this room called the Fountain of Truth. So it has 4 little columns, and on top of each one is a cloud, which is made from water vapor injected with a flavor. And the idea is that groups of people could go around one of these little clouds and they would smell the attributes that make up the Guinness flavor that people are familiar with. Things like roast barley and alcohol ester flavor and malt and so on. So I designed a very complicated system that would make it all work. It was designed to be automated and so on. But little did I know that the way that the flavors, which themselves were specially developed for this project, interacted with the water supply. I was injecting flavor into a water supply, would develop over like a period of time, months and years, was to cause like a huge problem where these biofilms build up in the pipework and effectively block all of the plumbing in the building, all like emanating out of this system. But because I designed the system, working with people who, they knew about parts of the system, they didn't know about the whole thing, it became my responsibility to fix it. So for the next 4 years, I used to go back every 2 months to clean the whole thing out and try and experiment to make ways of making it better and not be a total disaster. And eventually I did solve the problem. But that's the kind of thing that can happen if you just have an idea and just persuade the client that that's what they really need. But the good news is they love it and the whole thing is still there, because I guess it could have been ripped out. So that with Guinness is the danger of doing something that lasts for a long period of time. Now this project only lasted for 4 days, and this had its own set of problems. So this project's called Mount Rocky, and the client said, we would like you to build a giant chocolate climbing wall. Now, this chocolate climbing wall had to be in the shape of a chocolate bar called a Rocky, so it's called Mount Rocky, and they wanted this, just this notion, this advertising agency wanted this notion that you could climb up a giant bar of chocolate. So, yeah, not really practical and possible, but somewhere along the line, I did develop a special ambient chocolate. So you could effectively make a chocolate fountain, but you can make it 100 meters high if you wanted to, because you didn't have to keep heating up the chocolate. So I thought what we'll do is we'll use that technology and we'll just cover the whole wall in this flow of chocolate, which we set out to do. But I got a call one morning. I wasn't on site. And it turned out that whilst they were, the guys on site were filtering the tanks and replacing some of the components and doing a changeover of the chocolate, the whole system had sprung a leak. And there was 6 tons of chocolate heading downhill towards a lake. And this wasn't just any lake, because this was Alton Towers, which is Britain's foremost theme park. And this lake had special fish in, and Alton Towers have been told, because they polluted the lake in the past, apparently, they've been told that if the lake got contaminated one more time, the whole theme park would be shut indefinitely. But luckily, being a big sensible organisation, they did have some oil spill kits, so we were able to save the day with the chocolate finishing just a foot away from the lake. So never again do anything with chocolate in Bompas Parr studio. And sometimes even the smallest things have unexpected consequences. So this is a snake called Sable. Now, Sable was the Bompas Parr studio snake that we had on a few projects. It was something that Sam really wanted for some reason. He loved the idea of having a snake. Now, unfortunately, the snake went missing from its cage. And after about 3 weeks, we were convinced that it must have just gone down a drain and it disappeared from the studio. So we had a cleaner at the time, and she was afraid of snakes, which is fair enough. So we said, look, it's okay. She did stop work for a while. We were paying her to have to come in and clean. We realised the snake might be around. But after a while, we were convinced the snake had gone. We even had people stay overnight on quite a few occasions in the studio. All the lights off, and you'd put all these special things on the floor, trying to see if the snake came out. We had a professional snake kind of catcher come round. No sign of it. Unfortunately, the snake did show up, and the cleaner did find it, and she really did have a bad reaction to the snake. So it was quite sad. Her sister had actually been bitten by a snake and really badly injured. So that was the unfortunate instance of that. So animals, not good at all. This one, phenylethylamine, is a drug that's in chocolate, and so it's called the love drug. So Sam and I were giving a talk for the Victoria and Albert Museum called My Favourite Chemicals. And we were talking about this phenylethylamine, and we had some of it there. So we registered as a chemical research company, so you can get hold of different things. And the interesting thing that when you smell the phenylethylamine, it's really, really strong. It's almost like battery acid. So Sam invited someone to come and smell the liquid. And this guy was on a date, and instead of smelling it, he decided he would drink some of it, which was really not good. So he wasn't. As a consequence of that, he wasn't able to eat solid foods for a month. However, he did come. He was the first in line for our next event that we did. So can't all have been bad. And I don't know what happened to the girl on the date he was on, but it was quite awkward. So now we're much better at risk management. But on a more serious side, actually the way that we run projects financially is worth talking about. So we have these visions of things that we want to do, things that are difficult to achieve. But for us, that's the joy of working, is having the opportunity to do something spectacular. So it's great to show commitment. And for us, commitment is often putting our own money into something. So this is a project at Kew Gardens where we wanted to build a tutti-frutti boating lake and pineapple island, as you do, with a boat through banana cloud. But the client didn't have enough money to make it happen. So we decided that we would finance it. We would pump in our own money on top of theirs, and we would run a boating lake to recoup our costs. So that way of working has always been quite successful for us. So if you can show commitment to something, then you can make stuff happen that on the face of it shouldn't really happen. That's someone sitting on a cake. This is a project called Cake Holes. Those projects have the same name, but they were done. The bums on cake thing was done years later. This crazy golf course was called Cake Holes, not because the clients wanted it to be called Cake Holes. In fact, they said it can't be called Cake Holes, but we just made a neon sign that said Cake Holes, so it was called Cake Holes. It was officially called Crazy Golf, which is not exactly a name, is it? It was an architectural cake-themed crazy golf course. And we decided that the money that the client had wasn't enough, so we struck a really good deal where they would pay quite a good whack towards it. We would top that up, and then we would just take all of the ticket income and run it, staff it. And actually, it was so successful that whenever we've tried to work with the same client again, they always try and get money out of us because they can't believe that they just let us have all that ticket income. But that's showing commitment. But showing total commitment, of course, is doing something where you pay for it yourself. So in those early days of, say, alcoholic architecture, we were paying for it ourselves, but we did things on a total shoestring because it was the only way that we knew. But we later redid alcoholic architecture on a semi-permanent site for a whole year, and that was quite fun.
Welcome to Alcoholic Architecture, the world's first breathable cocktail bar. My name is Brother Rory. I'm going to be your host this evening.
So that's really just an imagination of what owning a bar is like, but of course, there's nothing like that at all, really. But for us, paying for a project, doing it, seeing it all the way through is really important. It actually makes you much stronger to leverage an idea with a client as well. So when you harness the two together, you can do something quite special. That's the inside of it. So, looking to the future, Sam and I are interested in how we can take what we've learnt over the last decade and actually take that to larger audiences. So typically, our events might run for anywhere from like a day to a few months, but we're interested in things that really go on and last for like at least 3 months, 2 or 3 months at a time, hit 20 or 30,000 people in a go and tour around the world. So just hit a larger audience. And one of the vehicles that we're using to do that is our British Museum of Food, which is taking our whole experiential world and know-how that we've developed and pumping it into a space where education and entertainment collide. So this is a show we've just done in King's Cross in London for the last 3 months with 25,000 visitors. It was taking a collection of 14,000 ice cream objects that have been collected over the last 40 years, had never been shown before. So we're putting that on and mixing it with things that were interactive and fun for people. So a very up-to-date modern museum experience there. So there was this was something where you'd put on a headset, an EEG headset, and eat an ice cream, and then it would respond to what was going on, the pleasure centres within your brain. There was glow-in-the-dark ice cream. There was making ice cream using salt and ice. There were frozen chambers that you could enter. So all sorts of fun and different things. But we're very interested in shows that tour using more of a theatre model. We're interested in who the investors are in shows. We're looking at how brands can invest in something. So rather than doing a marketing activation where brands just pay for something and then it's only up for a few days and then it goes, we're interested in using their money like they're a proper investor, putting like a show out on tour, which then spins off and becomes its own world. So for us, that's really exciting at the moment. And now, with 5 minutes to go, I did see, there we go, yeah. It's time for the finale. So, Joe, if you'd like to come up, and Katrina as well. Okay, let's move over here. Okay, can you quickly pour half of it in there and half of it in there? Yes. So what we're going to do is we're going to make, to celebrate the almost end of the conference, we're going to make a giant gin cloud using boiling water and 20 litres of liquid nitrogen. Just going to mix them together, really. So I think, Katrina, thank you very much. You can sit back down now. Thank you. So goggle up.
Taking my cues from the master.
So what we're going to do, Joe, is we're going to stand up there.
Okay.
And you're going to hold one of these, and I'm going to hold one of these. And then everyone's going to give us a really big countdown. And then we're just going to pour it into the buckets, which will shortly be filled with liquid nitrogen. So if you step round here, just give me a hand. Okay, thank you. That's right. Cool. You take your water. Let's take the lid off. Okay, up on the bench. Right, let's have a big countdown from 5, please. So we do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there you go, that's it, the gin cloud. Thank you very much. Cool. Cheers.